Hello there, Alan English here, actor, writer and autism trainer with another tutorial. This one on criticism. Now, what is criticism? Criticism is defined as people saying things about us and the things we do, sometimes in a negative way. It's all something that we've got to learn to live with and accept, and learning this can be hard to master for autistic people, myself included. Hell yeah. Now, forms of criticism can include written feedback, either electronic or on paper, detailing what we've got wrong in a particular situation. Now, the other form is verbal criticism, delivered to our faces in the form of a neutral lecture addressing what we've got wrong as well as what we've got right in a particular situation. It can also come in the form of a harsh rebuke or a reprimand, where we are fiercely told off for our mistakes. We can receive criticism that is professional, that is related to a work or a particular vocation. Or sometimes it's personal, relating to things we've said or done to other people. Or sometimes it's a mixture of both, personal and professional criticism. Now in Scotland, where I come from, criticism, or receiving it, it's called hearing home truths. And accepting home truths for me sometimes has been very difficult. The way these home truths have been learned has left one or two little lingering scars. Sometimes I have ruminated on these experiences, reliving and reimagining them. This is why I have avoided seeking out criticism, especially in new social situations, and I can find it hard to discuss criticism with other people. Sometimes I can conflate even honest criticism, well-intended criticism, with a personal attack. And these in turn can trigger flashbacks to genuinely disturbing experiences and can trigger meltdowns. So it can be a very, very dicey subject sometimes. When I was a child, I found actually that I was very good at absorbing written criticism. School reports, speech and drama, exam feedback, and show reviews. I would enjoy studying it and committing it to memory, especially if I found it useful. One such example was a school report that I got when I was 12 that read, "He has to learn to take setbacks, disappointments, and changes in routine." Now, this was a very valid criticism of me at the time and probably still is today. I found it harder to deal with oral or face-to-face criticism. It's much harder to absorb it, especially due to my low attention span. And it's also hard not to take personally and conflate it with real situations with being bullied or patronised. Now, one such example that still sits in my mind very heavily today was when I was 16 and my aunt came up to Aberdeen from Glasgow to babysit me and my younger sister. We were talking that night and she brought up the subject of something I had said to my cousin's then girlfriend. Now, I asked my cousin's then girlfriend if she had ever known his ex. His ex-girlfriend was someone I'd spoken to once very briefly on the phone. My aunt asked me, why did you ask her that? Why did I asked my cousin's then girlfriend about his ex-girlfriend, and my answer that it was a wedding and I'd been to a funeral only that morning and I was feeling sentimental, that didn't really cut it with her. Now, my mother actually was present at the time and she gave me a telling off for actually asking that question, but as far as I could tell, I'd caused no real harm or offence. And, my cousin's then girlfriend never brought up the subject again all the time she was with him. Now, my aunt putting me on the spot like this really caught me out, and the way she followed it up by saying I had hurt this woman's feelings felt unjustified, given that, although the question was, I admit, inappropriate, it had caused no serious harm, or so it seemed to me. Now, as an older and hopefully wiser man, I recognise it was probably not the best thing to say, and I would certainly never do anything like that now in a similar situation. Now, this conversation, which could really have happened at any time, had two long-term effects. The first was that I became really conscious and anxious about what I would say to people in social situations, more anxious than I already was, it's got to be said. I already had an underlying anxiety about these situations, and this incident with my aunt really served to heighten that anxiety. Sometimes the anxiety would overwhelm me and make it difficult to keep conversations going. I was afraid of saying something that might impact me, if not immediately, then sometime down the line in the future. It might come back to bite me in the ass. Now, the other effect, which was a little bit more corrosive, was that I found myself really hating my aunt for putting me on the spot like that. I hated being caught out in that way and being made to feel ashamed for something that, in my mind, did not amount to very much. So in my mind, I made her into a hate figure. It was compounded by things that were going on between my aunt and my mother, and my grandfather had recently passed away. It was his funeral I was attending the same day I went to the wedding where I met my cousin's then girlfriend, and yeah, there was a lot of conflict going on between my mother and my aunt at the time about, well, among other things, what was in my grandfather's will. And to this day, apart from a brief phone conversation shortly afterwards, I've not seen or spoken to my aunt since. I was 16 at the time, and I'm now 40, and it's been 24 years since I've spoken, to my aunt about something that kind of still lingers in the brain, which is really kind of strange, when I think about it, and also in its way, it must be said, rather sad. But there you have it. The memory of my conversation settled into my mind in a really big way, and because I didn't see her or speak to her again, it made the hate figure that I had created out of my aunt to take root a lot more easily. This can happen. Now, as with so many other things in my life, I would ruminate about it, reimagine and relive it endlessly. She would pop into my head at random moments, criticising me for things that were completely disconnected from the thing that she had actually criticised me about when we spoke. For example, I was working in a burger bar between graduating from university and moving down here to London, where I studied and eventually became an actor. And my aunt, she popped into my head at this inappropriate time. You see, what I was doing was a kind of a repetitive task in the burger bar, where I was taking frozen meat patties out of the freezer and popping them straight into the broiler. The broiler was where they cooked the burgers. It was a repetitive task, and frankly very easy for the mind to wander, but it was doing this task that my aunt popped into my head, and she criticised me for wanting to be an actor, in my head, and she's like, and tell me things like, okay, I wasn't that good, I've got a degree, and I should be getting a real job. And she kept nipping it. This vision in my head kept nipping at me. Eventually I lost my temper and I swung the tongs at this imaginary vision. And the frozen meat patty went flying out the tongs, skidded across the floor and into the manager's office. It was crazy things like that. And sometimes the kind of the memories would and the kind of the ruminations would trigger meltdowns. It was hard to kind of give up the habit of ruminating on these things once you settle into it. There are another couple of incidents I want to talk about. Now, a few years later, I was living in London, and I was about a year into my career as a performance poet, and I was taking part in a poetry slam. And before this poetry slam, I was fretting nervously. And a poetry slam, incidentally, is a poetry competition where you get a line of poets, usually between about 15 and 20 poets. They go on stage, perform a poem, and you've got in front of a panel of judges, and the judges give them scores, and whoever gets the highest score, whichever poet gets the highest score, wins the poetry slam. And before this poetry slam, run up to it, I was feeling really nervous, and in the end, I didn't really do all that well. I wasn't really happy with my performance, and I was sat at a table in a bar with a few of the other competitors, and I was just feeling really down after my performance. I really, really hated it. And one of the judges came over to our table, completely uninvited, completely unexpected, right out of the blue, and she started speaking to us, friendly way, fair enough, but she started telling us what we had got wrong. She was giving us feedback, basically professional feedback. That's really all it was. And she started with me. The feedback that she gave me was, it wasn't you I was seeing up there on the stage. Now, what she meant by that was the material I was performing did not reflect my natural style or my true abilities. And it's funny, really, and I can't actually remember what it was I performed that night, but I remember the criticism more, which admittedly rang true. And I know it rang true because it stung like hell. But I reacted to this criticism like a complete moron, very childishly, it's got to be said. And I told her that she was only saying what she was saying because she felt sorry for me, and she says to me right back, well, if you think that, you're weak. And that last remark really rattled my brain. I stormed out of the place in a huff. I yelled abuse at her across the street, and I stormed back in there and just about stopped myself from doing something stupid, tipping a jug of water over her head or something like that might have triggered a fight. And I managed to make it home without any further hassle. My reaction could have been a lot worse, and it was absolutely abominable the way I did react, and I've had to learn to kind of react a little bit more, a little bit better and a little bit more professionally. I should just take it with I've come to seek out criticism now, and just ways to improve. It's a good kind of way to prepare yourself for it, is to seek it out, to seek out feedback, and that way I think you're in a better state to receive it when it actually comes. If you're looking for it, if you're constantly looking for ways to improve, you're looking for feedback, and you've got that into your mindset. That means when it does come, you're in a better place to receive it, and receive it maturely and professionally. And I was thinking of this, a couple of years later at another poetry slam, and so it was another poetry slam. I didn't win, but I always felt with these things that if you could take part in these sorts of events, these competitions, and you lose, it is good manners to congratulate the winner. And I thought the winner in this case was highly deserving. So I walked up to him. He was an older white guy, and he performed in this really, really intense, magnetic, almost kind of beat poet style. Hope he doesn't mind my saying that if he's watching this, but but no, he was a deserving winner. And I walked up to him and says, "Congratulations, well done, thought you did really well." And he says to me, "Are you leaving?" I says, "I was." Well, he says, "Can I speak to you outside?" And he took me outside, and he started, and he criticised my poem. Now, the poem I had performed, I remember the material I'd performed that evening with this guy. The poem was, and it's online somewhere, it was called "I Like Strong Women, but I Can't Stand Bitches." It was me having a go at all the women who've attacked me personally in the past. And the way he described the poem, it was like a sugar-coated bullet, he says. I was using clever words and fragility and phrases to disguise the fact that I was essentially being misogynistic, really hating on the women, but making it like I was not really hating on the women. Uh, Again, it was a valid piece of criticism, perfectly valid, and it did actually have me thinking though, because I took this criticism very well at the time, a lot better than I took the earlier criticism, but it did have me thinking, if I just had that from a woman, would I have taken it quite so well? I still ponder that, but the way I've dealt with criticism over the years has hopefully improved, and like I said, I'm trying to get myself into the mentality of seeking out criticism to better prepare myself for it, both in my poetry and my theatre, but also with this type of thing, with my training. So I always like to seek it out, and and look for ways to improve, and and take creative suggestions. I think that's the only way you can get better. If you care about what you do, then you will learn to accept legitimate criticism. And by criticism, I don't mean trolling. People who randomly abuse you on the internet, or just or people who say, "Oh, you're crap," or "you're fat," or anything, which is the sort of thing that bores me, frankly, and the sort of thing I frankly don't indulge in, and I couldn't be bothered with. No, I'm not talking trolling here. Just people slagging you off randomly without a proper consideration of who you are and what it is you do. I'm talking legitimate criticism. People who know you, who have seen what you do, and who offer you considered, balanced, and thoughtful criticism on your work or your personal actions. And this is the sort of criticism I think we should all be looking out for and be ready to receive when it comes. This is something that in my life I have tried to get better at receiving. So that's something I've worked very hard at. And I can't say I'm perfect at it, but it's something I'm aware of and I continue to try and improve upon. Thank you very much.